happens when a man looks at the abyss and nothing looks back at him. That means there must be something wrong with that man's understanding. And unfortunately, for this man, Elon Musk, whatever his name may be, maybe it's a lie, PayPal Mafia, the shocking revelation of his apartheid history, full of tyranny and Tesla stealing of South Africans' gold and products and everything to create PayPal Mafia. These cowards that live in places like the Caucasus Mountain always want to come around and pretend that they're not Germans. They're all Germanic background asshole that want to call themselves Jews when you're not even Jewish. You wish. Let's listen.
The groups that support them, like Forster, people like Forster, Forster in the 1930s had been a member of a 1913. So the apartheid laws kick in the 1950s. Musk was born, Elon Musk was born in 1971 in Johannesburg, and at that point, the Prime Minister was a guy called John Forster.
This guy is the 666 with Donald Trump. Best believe that. 1971, he was born as well. The same time, you know who else was born? Tupac Shakur. That's why the devil tried to make it seem like he knows a king is born, but yet he wants to have so many kids that are gonna contest in the future, like Elon Musk, our coming salvation. So we're gonna find out. Musky tears.
And John Forster's background is very telling, really, because Forster in the 1930s had been a member of a neo-Nazi militia called the OB, which was openly sympathetic and linked to the Nazis in Germany.
Let's pause it and show y'all his grandfather. Elon Musk's grandfather. Right there. Right? That's Elon Musk's grandfather. So that y'all see these Germanic fools that were trying to make apartheid in South Africa are the ones behind the same apartheid happening in America. So the revolutionary warfare is here, y'all. Get ready. Don't let this clown talk about going to Mars, because he's a fool. That's on steroids, crack cocaine, steroids. So let's continue, y'all. We have no time for these clowns. Let's listen in on his little history.
Responsible for all kinds of attacks, but including burning Jews out of their businesses in Johannesburg.
And we're talking about what years?
In the 1930s, so the late 1930s. And then South Africa goes to war as an ally of Britain against Hitler.
You see that?
The OB and
Musketeers and Trump?
The groups that support them, like Forster, people like Forster, they actively oppose that. They actually are in touch with, OB is in touch with German military intelligence, and they plan to assassinate the Prime Minister of South Africa, Jan Smuts, and overthrow the government and have it support Hitler. That plan fails because the Germans are unable to provide the necessary weapons and back out. But in 1942, John Forster, later Prime Minister, stands up and gives a speech, and he talks about the system that their kind of ideological belief system, which was Christian nationalism. And he says Christian nationalism in South Africa is the same as Nazism in Germany. And
see that? Christianity, Nazism. meaning they are stealing your identity and pretending to be you just to destroy you. And then they want to go to your community, take your land, take your woman, take everything, and pretend they're only there to be friendly and keep the peace. Don't have none of these people beside you pretending to be your friend. Let them know you are my enemy. I'm not a friend of yours.
In Italy, it's all anti-democratic. It's all the
So
same
I will
thing.
keep you close
By
and keep your
1971, when
corporation
Elon Musk was born, that man
family
is the
closer.
Prime Minister of South Africa. And Christian nationalism is the basis of not only the political philosophy, but the entire education system that Elon Musk is brought up into.
So take us from Elon Musk's grandfather moving to South Africa in the 50s to his father, how they gained their wealth.
So Elon Musk's grandfather moves there in the 1950s. He's not particularly prosperous. He arrives without a lot of money, but it's Elon Musk's father, Errol, who makes the real money, principally through investments in emerald mines in Zambia. And, you know, mining conditions in
Emerald mines in Zambia. Here's Elon Musk's father, y'all. That's Elon Musk's father. He looks like a Russian. He looks like a oligarchy guy that wants to get all the mines, concessions in Africa, and all these crazy asshole Germanic wolves of Wall Street. They pretend that their whole game is to pillage Africa and the people, instead of understanding that their end is coming. And they're not playing nice to kind of save their families and their so-called grace. They're pretending to have nothing but warfare against us because they think we're winning. Well, guess what? We are winning. So y'all better stop, otherwise y'all gonna lose everything. Let's continue.
Southern Africa in that period were really pretty dire in the 1960s and 70s. Very high death rate, very poor conditions, but the owners got very rich. And Musk lived what can only be described as a neo-colonial life. If you were white South African in that period and you had any money at all, you lived with servants at your beck and call, you lived in sprawling housing, and what you see with Elon Musk is that when we get a glimpse into just how much money he had when...
You hear that? Harold Musk. He's a Herodian. That means he's Harold. That means look at history. Find out who Harold is. That's why he has a son named Elon Musk as a 666 representative.
He and Elon's mother get divorced. She says at the time that, well, he owns a yacht, he owns a jet, he owns several houses, so there was considerable wealth there.
Was the grandfather of Elon Musk on the record in his support for Forster?
Well, he was certainly on the record in his support for apartheid, very vividly so, yes. And he said that that's why he moved to South Africa from Canada in 1940 was in support of it. Now, the grandfather himself is killed a few years later in a plane crash, but is not...
You hear that? He's killed in a plane crash. I wonder why, because he's killed so many people that he had to fall in the depth of hell.
Own what Elon Musk's grandmother's personal views of Forster particularly were, but they were both avid supporters of the apartheid system, and the grandmother lived for a number of years afterwards.
So you
see that? They're all supporters of apartheid and constant destruction of our community. Let's pray for the Lord to break their teeth and break their companies and break everything they ever own. Tesla, you're gonna keep on burning.
talking about Elon Musk's maternal grandparents and how they moved to South Africa, but talk about their roots in Canada.
Originally, the grandparents have no connection to South Africa. They're born and grow up in Canada. And in the 1930s, the grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, he's head of the Canadian branch of a US movement called Technocracy Incorporated. And Technocracy Incorporated is essentially a movement to overthrow democratic government in the United States and have...
Wow. You heard that, y'all? We're gonna continue. Wow.
Democrats, but big businessmen in many ways, come in and run the country. That's partly a reaction.
He's trying to do his grandfather's business because he's the
the
666.
that he's introduced in the United States.
That's why
From Canada,
he's
they would
training
hope to launch a coup
Barron,
against FDR.
Trump's son, to be wicked.
Branch of this movement to overthrow the government in Canada. Haldeman heads that branch. And through the 1930s, it takes on increasingly fascist overtones. They start wearing grey uniforms, model on the Nazi brown and black shirts. And so when Canada declares war on Germany in 1939 alongside Britain, the movement is banned because it's clearly sympathetic to Hitler. Then Haldeman is arrested.
Elon Musk's grandfather.
Elon Musk's grandfather is arrested. They find documents sympathetic to the Nazis and other subversive documents inside his house, and he is sent to prison for a few months and then remains on essentially a subversion watch list for the rest of the war. Yeah, so he's basically regarded as a Nazi sympathizer, a fellow traveler.
And about a decade later, he moves to South Africa. Why?
So
He is a
after the war,
Nazi.
He founds another political
This is all they
movement
do.
which has deep anti-Semitic roots and actually promotes the forgery, the protocols of the
Elders of Zion.
Elders of Zion. That's it. But obviously, after the war and the Holocaust, there's no real appetite for that in Canada. It's a failing political movement, and so his eye casts down to South Africa. By 1950. The apartheid government has been in power for 2 years, and Haldeman looks at it and thinks that's just my kind of place, which clearly that was what he would want to create in Canada and had been trying to create in the 1930s. And so that's the point at which he and his wife, they move to South Africa and become very fervent supporters of apartheid.
Now, I wanted to blend in some breaking news in addition to cutting off all aid to South Africa. News of the region, and that is Sam Nujoma, the freedom fighter turned president who led Namibia to independence from apartheid South Africa in 1990, has died at the age of 95, often referred to as Namibia's founding father, known for his motto, a united people striving to achieve a common good for all members of the society will always emerge victorious. Used to be called Southwest Africa, became the independent Namibia. Talk about Sam Nujoma and how that fits into this picture of South Africa through apartheid.
So Sam Nujoma was the head of the Southwest Africa People's Organization, which was the liberation movement of Namibia. SWAPO, indeed. Really, SWAPO takes off and is able to have effect after Angola becomes independent with the fall of the Portuguese dictatorship. The Portuguese colonizers leave Angola, and Angola provides a base then for SWAPO to really fight to liberate Southwest Africa. That becomes known as the Border War. Euphemistically, the South Africans call it the Border War. They actually invade Angola in an attempt to overthrow the Marxist-leaning government of Angola, but also to keep SWAPO at bay. But the war goes on, and eventually South Africa loses that war. At that period, though, one of the things you see is that Peter Thiel, another member of the PayPal Mafia, a very close friend of Musk, he had been at school in Johannesburg, but his father gets a job on a uranium mine near Swakopmund in what is then Southwest Africa. And so Peter Thiel moves there as a child and goes to school there.
Look at that. The Arabian mine in Africa. These people, all these nations. We pray that God break you and your family and continuously break and get rid of your wicked family for everything you're doing to our family and our land. Because you guys are not fair. You guys don't give a damn.
And the thing to know about Southwest Africa, the reason it was separate from South Africa is that it had been a German colony until the end of the First World War. Then it becomes falls under South Africa's mandate, partly because at that point South Africa was a British colony. When South Africa becomes a republic in the 60s, it hangs on to Southwest Africa and it becomes a South African colony. But the population, big part of the population was of German ancestry. And you could, I remember going to Windhoek in the early 90s, and the main thoroughfare through Windhoek was called Hermann Goeringstrasse, named not after the Luftwaffe chief, but after his father, who had been a governor of German Southwest Africa. In Swakopmund, it was even more extreme. It was notorious for many, many years, really into the 80s and 90s, as a hotbed of open support, continued support for the Nazis and for Hitler. The New York Times has a story from the mid-70s of a reporter pulling up at a gas station to get his car filled with gas, and the attendant openly giving a Nazi salute and saying Heil Hitler to him. You could go to curio shops in Swakopmund and they would sell Nazi-themed mugs and flags and things, and they openly celebrated Hitler's birthday every May. Thiel went to a German school there, so that's the atmosphere he grows up in. His father is an official on a uranium mine there. And the interesting thing about the uranium mine, amongst many other things, is that it supplied part of the uranium to develop the South African atomic bombs in the 1970s, which were developed in league with Israel. Now, part of the deal with Israel was that South Africa would deliver yellowcake uranium to Israel. We don't know where the yellowcake came from. It may have come from that Swakopmund.
You hear that? And they talk about they're Jewish. No, more like they're Germans, like their brothers. They want to make some uranium coalition of building weapons and all this against us because they want to take our lands and they want to pretend that we don't understand how to fight. Well, this is war. You guys can't wait for the Great War. We're going to give it to you. Mark the word.
Area mine, or it may have come from somewhere else in South Africa, but South Africa was shipping yellowcake to Israel at the same time because it too was developing nuclear weapons.
And talk about what Peter Thiel has said about all this. You know, remember, as we cover conventions for decades now, Peter Thiel standing up at the first Republican convention that nominated President Trump and supporting him and who he is.
So Peter Thiel has said of his time in Swakopmund, and particularly the school.
Clown Peter Thiel, whatever the hell his name is.
Education. That it turned in,
Guy's such a clown.
Into a
about 0 to 1.
I think that's
more like 1 to 0. You
is that
foolish clown. You just got money from the banks. You have no idea.
There's two kinds of whites there. There's the Afrikaners who we've been talking about, but there's a big English-speaking white population. And one of
these guys are so delinquent.
They're
they pretty much do crack, believe it or not.
They opposed apartheid, but they gained all of its benefits. And most of them, certainly not all, there were some really heroic individuals.
And they like to F black women and then tell them not to mess with black guys. Otherwise, they wouldn't get money. This is what these guys do. Evil, wicked white men.
Whose parents did very well out of the apartheid system, who deny responsibility for it. They blame it on the Afrikaners, they blame it on a government, extreme right-wing government. But then they have to explain how it is that their own parents were so able to do so well out of apartheid, and then they put that down to individual talent, that they're naturally gifted, and that leads them down this whole libertarian path, anti-government path, because essentially they have to explain how they too were benefits of apartheid without taking responsibility.
And talk about their relationship, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
Well, they're co-founders of PayPal together. They essentially share the same.
They didn't find nothing. A payment system? It's not an idea. These people have no clue what they're doing. Just rich kids want to play in the ghetto. Well, time to bully their ass until they go back to the little room that they belong. They can jail their own self. Because they cannot take fame and pretend to hide, because the day of the poor is coming and they're gonna get it.
Kind of worldview, from what I can make out, they're libertarians. They're very opposed to any kind of DEI.
They're gonna get it. These two guys and many of their friends, all because the day of the poor is so close that they're gonna wish to throw all their money from a plane and never again wish to have that money, because they're gonna wish for life that they never got. Look at them smiling. Evil, evil, evil. Tech idiots, hackers, pretend they created a platform called PayPal, but yet it's a payment system to oppress countries and oppress people and oppress internet of things, and then pretend they understand how to be civil. Look at this clown, his bald head. This guy is not an inventor. This guy doesn't know nothing. He just finds people and tells them to shut up. Do what I say. I have all the money. I want to be like Heinsberg, or whatever his name is, Einstein. So I'm going to take Tesla. I'm going to represent Nikola Tesla. And I'm going to invent cars. I'm going to have claim to fame, just like this idiot. And then this fool here, he has some stupid book called 0 to 1. Like, I see if he came from the bottom. He don't know what the hell he's talking about. He's a foolish thinker. These guys are all philosophical goof clowns. And they have no idea what they're doing until the end comes. Then you're going to see how much of a pussy they are.
I think Teal buys into the same message about anti-white, the war on white people in South Africa that South African white groups like AfriForum have been pushing in the United States. So I think they philosophically, they're very...
God needs to show us where Satan's goons are like this fool, so they can get touched.
And then talk about David Sachs.
Like the
and
ghetto.
talk more specifically
They're
about
pillaging,
what you're
like
referring
their
to
grandfathers
as the
and
PayPal mafia. I don't
fathers.
think most people in this
Their
country
mafioso
understand
thoughts.
all
We're going
of
to
these
tell you
connections,
people
and
how we're
it's
going to make
a
sure you
usual
go down.
situation where these what some of the wealthiest men in the world work together, founded PayPal, and now surround the president of the United States.
Yeah, so David Sachs was born in Cape Town in the 70s.
Because
And
Trump is a fucking German.
His parents take him to Tennessee when he's 5 years old, so he didn't grow up in the same milieu as Musk and Teal. But he did grow up in the white South African diaspora, for sure.
Afrikaans, you ain't
clearly
know
shares the same
nothing.
things. As you say, they're part of the PayPal mafia. They all get rich from the creation of this company. They're all at the top running it. And now Sachs has emerged as Trump's AI and crypto czar. Again, part of the same project. So you can see the
And he was a chief fundraiser for President Trump, as you said, born in Cape Town.
Yes, a big. So they've all emerged with essentially, from what I can make out, the same philosophy, and of course that's only been reinforced by their success. They're convinced, obviously, of their own genius and worth, and that government, particularly whether it's South African government, or in this case it seems to be the US government, is an obstacle to success.
And then we talked about
My
it in
opinions
part
got
one,
more genius
finally
ideas than
Roa
these
Botha,
fools.
making this little quartet, white men of a certain age together, and his history also a part of the PayPal mafia.
Yes, he's part of it, and he has not emerged as a open supporter of Trump. I'm not entirely sure what his personal views are on this, but he does have a very interesting background. His grandfather was Pik Botha, who was the last foreign minister of apartheid South Africa, and Pik Botha's job essentially was to go around the world, particularly the West, and assure them that apartheid was being amended, was being dismantled.
After they
Well, in
done
fact, it
stole
was in
around
many
and do
ways
so
although
much,
what was known as petty
now
apartheid,
they
which
want
was
to
the
pretend
routine
to have a
discrimination,
truce. This is
segregation,
all they do.
was being dismantled. In
Nope,
fact, the
no
political
truce.
system was
War.
actually only reinforcing it, solidifying it. The government at the time cooked up a system of 3 parliaments that would represent different parts of the population, but and give people.
We got
who
war
were
fetishes
who
against you
weren't white
people,
the vote,
and we're gonna
but
make
none of
sure
those
you
people
feel
were
our
vote. There was
fetish.
no black parliament.
We're gonna make
Partly
sure
because
your
they were
families
being recruited from
understand
their
our
homeland.
war
The idea was
fetish.
that they were no longer South African anyway. So Pik Botha went around trying to apologise and excuse for this system, and he was successful with conservatives. He saw a lot of Reagan and people, they loved him here, and the same with Thatcher in Britain. They saw them as the acceptable face of apartheid. And he was so deluded by the end, he was convinced. I remember meeting him during the era of the transition to democracy from apartheid. He was so convinced that he was indispensable to the system that Mandela would have to appoint him foreign minister, which he duly did not.
Would you say the background of all these men's families was fleeing Mandela's South Africa?
Well, some of them left before. I mean, it's worth noting that Elon Musk left in 1988 at the age of 18, just as he would have become eligible to be drafted into the South African army, as all white males were at that point, which might have led him to fight the border war that I was talking about in Angola against SWAPO, or it might have led him into the townships.
Yeah, but he got scared and ran off to U.S. because he knows he's not a warrior.
Huge amount of civil unrest in South
He's a
Africa. The
PayPal
country had
pussy
become
mafia.
Ungovernable. It was under a state of emergency, and the white troops were trying to keep some form of order in the black townships like Soweto. He left before he had to do any of that.
Exactly, because
So
he
very
knows
interestingly,
he wouldn't have been
people aren't
alive.
aware, Elon Musk had a company called X.com. It was an online bank. It merged with Confinity in 2000 to form PayPal. The merged company was renamed PayPal in
See that?
2001.
Stupid clown
These guys who you've
about
just
a
laid
bank.
out, well, I think
X
both
bank.
Sequoia
This
Capital.
clown
Now
is unknown.
key
That means
players,
X.
and
That means you're
brings
going to
us
be
to
unknown
Charles Order
until you're
on
gone.
Friday.
No
To
one will
cut
remember
off
you.
all aid to South Africa and offer refugee status in the United States to the white South Africans who are, quote, victims of unjust racial discrimination. But interestingly, many in the right-wing white lobby say they want to stay and focus on ending black majority rule. This is Flip Base, the chairperson of what's called the Solidarity Union.
We might disagree with the ANC.
Yeah, you ain't never gonna end it. Soon, all you old, racist, wicked people will die, and your children will be left desolate, because we'll make sure they understand
We want
knowledge
to build a future in South Africa.
of your wickedness,
So he
and
is
none of your
speaking
technology
for
is
this
going to
is
help it.
AfriForum. Put this in context, and what about Afrikaners saying, no, this is our land, we don't want to come to the United States?
Well, AfriForum is backpedaling furiously now because there's been a huge backlash in South Africa from people who blame it for this situation. In fact, some people have accused it of treason. But if you look at what AfriForum was saying just a decade ago, and certainly in 2018, when people like Kali Kriel, who was head of the AfriForum, and others were coming to the United States, they were claiming there was a white genocide. They were claiming there was a war on white people in South Africa. And they
Yeah,
were
false claims,
essentially
false
trying to
claims, and
characterize,
constant
the post-apartheid
accusation.
era of one of oppression of Afrikaners, that they were
We
the true
live
victims
in
of it.
peace.
And
As long
this
as you
is-
leave
this
us
is-
alone in our
they're not
community
alone
and
in
our
this.
economy,
There has been a phenomenon ever since the end of
don't bring
apartheid
wickedness
of,
to our community. We let you live,
presenting themselves
not too
as
far
victims.
from
There
us,
was a-
because we're gonna watch you.
There was a song
This is how
emerged
we
in the
live.
1990s called
Otherwise,
De La Rey. It's very
we're gonna
popular
show
in
you
Africa. It was
people
sung in bars and rugby
wisdom.
matches. And De
It's
La Rey was a
greater than
famous
knowledge.
general who fought to the bitter end against the British in the Boer War, the Second Boer War, in the early 20th century, which the Afrikaners then lost. And This song essentially is an attempt to
All of you
take
people that look like this
Africans back
guy
to a time when
are
they
gonna
were the
respect
kings,
us,
when it was their
because
women and
wisdom is
children
greater
dying
than
in the British
knowledge, and you
concentration
guys will
camp,
go
when
into
they were the people
slavery.
who were oppressed.
Believe me,
And it conjures
it
up
will be
this
brutal.
war general who, he may be losing the war, but he's going to fight to the last, a bitter ender. And this is how they've been characterizing themselves, some of them. And AfriForum is part of that kind of attempt.
It's not a
to
joke,
read
y'all.
that
He that
history
leadeth to
and make out that
captivity
they're
shall
this
go into
minority that
captivity.
has long been persecuted,
These people
not
know
just
they're
by the
done, and they're
Muslim parts of Europe,
fighting
but by the British, and they have a long history.
because they
And
know
apartheid
they have
was
no
just a
more
means of
might in
survival.
them.
All they were trying to do was to keep themselves and their culture alive. It has had one other effect, which they hadn't expected and has alarmed them, is that in all of the orders that have been given out cancelling aid and agreements, one of them affects agricultural products being imported to the United States, which have generally been duty-free as a means of helping Africa.
Clowns.
One result is that their own products are no longer being imported duty-free into the United States. So these white South African farmers who've been complaining of oppression will now actually be being hit with tariffs or
Good.
regular duties, and so it's going to cost them financially, which is one of the
I
reasons
hope
they're
it
so
bleeds
upset
them
by it
until
and
they
pretend
leave
that
Africa.
it was nothing to do with them.
Guardian reporter Chris McGreal. He was the Johannesburg.
That's right. We're gonna end it right here, y'all. The truth of the matter is, we are at war since our inception in this world. Every generation, we are facing oppression, tyranny, and constant, strange children of the wicked, what you call oppression. And the truth of the matter is, it's God that's behind this, because our community is not together. Our community don't want to create the revolution that we deserve yet. But God's got a plan to make us go into this oppression harder and harder, using these clowns because of their hate and their wickedness and covetousness. They will bring the war. So that's perfect. It's going to force us to work hard, force us to come together. Black women, black men come together, sell from home, push your business together on social media, and don't worry, we're going to show these people that it's nothing. It's nothing to spread the bread. You clowns want to be multi-billionaires and millionaires with no understanding of family. All your so-called 14 children, our forefathers will make sure they all don't grow. Mark my words. You people think you can get away with what your ancestors and your fathers and your wicked people did, and you're not trying to right your wrongs of your bloodline? Y'all have something coming. Right your wrongs of your bloodline. Stop having this hate and having concupiscence and having greed. Otherwise, you see Teslas burning, you see all this stuff because people don't like people that think their life is more special because they eat more food than you. No, you eat the same food as me, sucker. You eat the same food as me. Stop acting like you eating something out of this world because you think you should have billion dollars or $1 trillion. You guys are clowns. This is why the world will continuously be at war, because of these people.